Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services has recommended to the National Assembly that suspended Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe and retired Judge Nkola Motata be removed from office. The committee says that both judges have committed gross misconduct necessitating their removal. Let's unpack this now and speak to Mpumelelo Zikalala, Legal Analyst and Alison Tilley, Judges Motata Campaign Coordinator. Let me thank you both for your time this afternoon. I'll start with you, Mpumelelo. This comes after the JSC, of course, submitting a damning report to Parliament about several months ago. Are you surprised that this is the route the committee has taken?
Not at all. I think the committee would have taken the recommendations that come from the JSC. It is a structure that we believe in. It is a structure which is made up of individuals that are properly and competent to take decisions such as these ones. So I think it should follow that whenever such information is provided and they've received the assurance that all the procedures were done in terms of the Constitution, in terms of the applicable legislation, then they wouldn't find anything that will falter in the process and simply would move it over. Now, it purely rests within the National Assembly as to how they're going to vote.
And Alison, let's talk about then that very process, in fact, to the National Assembly now, because we know Section 177 of the Constitution is very clear on what happens now and how this matter is to unfold, particularly when it comes from the JSC. Let's talk about the process that unfolds now.
Well, at this point, it would have to be sent to a vote in the National Assembly, and they'd have to schedule it. Once the vote is taken, it depends on what the outcome of the vote is. But if the vote is for removal, then that would have to be sent to the President for signature. The President doesn't have any option in the matter. If it is a removal vote, then that's what he will confirm according to the Constitution.
And Alison, given the fact that, we've been seeing developments around these two judges for years now, over time, and looking at where we find ourselves as a country, it's uncharted territory, one must say. Is this likely to be precedent setting?
I think it depends. I suppose that's what a lawyer always says, it depends. But it certainly will indicate that the JSC process through the Conduct Committee and the Conduct Tribunal and through the various appeals that have got on, that the process is sound. We know that it's constitutional. It's been tested in many courts at different times. I think every point that could be taken has been. And where we are now is that we know how it must work. And I think the challenge is then looking back to the JSC and the Judicial Conduct Committee and the matters that have been hanging around there for a while. Can we move them on quickly? Judges should not have a cloud hanging over them. The matters that are raised and come to a tribunal do need to be dealt with quickly, so that we retain our faith and our understanding that the judiciary are a judiciary of integrity, and I think that's something that I'm definitely taking away from this process.
And it's quite a big one. And Mpumelelo, I wonder then, because when one was listening to some of what was coming out, from that parliamentary committee sitting, there was a concern that, there is this process. The judge president, for example, John Hlophe, is challenging this particular decision. And some were saying, no, maybe pause, put the brakes on this, and let's see what becomes the outcome of that. But how much then of an influence or even a role will that particular process of his challenge play in the process now moving forward?
Unless if he goes to court on an urgent basis and says, before the National Assembly sits, can I please get a relief or an interdict stopping them from discussing this matter on an urgent basis, I don't think it's going to have much of a role. The defense might be on the other side. Well, allow the process to continue and simply nullify all the decisions that would stem from the allegedly incorrect decision of the JSC. But what must be noted is that Judge Hlophe, especially Judge President Hlophe, has given an opportunity to go and challenge the matter in the Supreme Court of Appeals, and he's the one that did not push the matter. or carry on with all the steps that are available to him. I think if we were sitting with the judgment awaiting from the Constitutional Court, it would have been a different story. But the hands of Parliament were actually tied because they have a matter that they need to adjudicate on, a matter that started as early back as 2008 in terms of the first complaint being filed. And it's up until now it has been done. It hasn't been done and dusted. And again, you have a judge president who was sitting at home earning a salary. Meanwhile, there's nothing which is being rendered by him to the judiciary in terms of the services that are there. You might one may even bring it as wasted expenditure. You are paying for someone to stay at home, something they should not be. And I think it's also something that should be looked at in terms of how the JSC and the tribunal is actually working in terms of finalizing this matter as quickly as possible. Of course, you have to do that with caution because you do not want to stumble on the rights of other individuals in terms of the right to respond. But at the end of the day, you do have the pressure of saying that get this matter to finality as soon as possible, save as much taxpayers' money as possible, and arrive at a certain conclusion with all the processes having been followed to the T.
Now, Mpumelelo, let me stay with you before I move back to Alison. So can then both of them, let's say that the National Assembly votes and says that, it votes for, affirmative and upholds what the committee is saying and the JSC, can they challenge, that particular decision in the court, or is it cast in stone as soon as it gets to the president?
They can, but it's the different parts of the process that should be challenged. We need to challenge the decision of the JSC first and say the JSC has been incorrect, and then only then move on to the National Assembly, because strictly speaking, the National Assembly hasn't done anything wrong. It's simply following the processes as prescribed by the Constitution. But the trigger or the initiator of all these things is a decision that was issued by the JSC. So if you want to extinguish it completely, go and say the JSC was correct in arriving at that decision, and then you'll get your relief. The problem with that is that they've waited for too long. The decision of the JSC was issued a while ago, and they haven't done anything up until now in order to challenge the process. So going to the High Court, going to the SCA, and go even to the Constitutional Court if it needs be, would have been the process that they would need to follow. So if they go to court now, the very first hurdle is to say, why have you waited for so long in order to you to bring this particular matter? Haven't you created self-created agency in which the court are not going to entertain? Because had it been that of a sole issue to you, you would have moved over with speed, which is something that you haven't done up until now.
Alison, I see you're nodding. As I then come back to you, I'd like for you to also answer this particular question. I know it's one of those that I'm putting up there, and certainly maybe we don't all have the answers for it. What happens then if the National Assembly does not have the numbers to simply push this through? Where do we then go with the process?
Well, that is the end of the process if they fail to remove him. Either a judge, then presumably we go back to where we were before. And that would mean that, at this point, I would imagine that Judge Motata would want to retire. He has effectively retired. But there would be a question then over the judge president and whether he would want to come back to his position as Judge President in the Western Cape. There is still another conduct matter pending in relation to him. So of course that would have to be dealt with as well. But it would be surprising, a surprising result, and I think we'd have to scratch our heads and see if that is the best outcome, given how fraught and difficult things have become, particularly with Judge Hlophe over many years.
And Alison, someone is watching us tonight and they're probably saying, but if Judge Motata has retired, why then are you pursuing this kind of process? Let's answer that question for them.
Yeah, the thing is, he wasn't retired when we started. And the process has taken a terribly long time. I really agree. And a lot of that has been through the judges, and correctly so. They're entirely entitled to challenge the process and the laws as we go along. These were the first judges to do this. They've really had to pave the way, and that has taken a long time, such that Judge Motata is really now, I would imagine, not wanting to come back from what is effectively retirement. But it's a situation that he knew was coming. He has earned his salary every year since his suspension. I would imagine he's been making provision for his retirement as we all must do. It's only judges who get a salary for life, and I would hope that he would think that having received, you know, 1.5 million rand a year over all of those years would have at least put him in a position where he can take care of himself and his family.
And it's quite an interesting one. So very briefly then, Mpumelelo, will then the length of time that it has taken for this process to get to this point then matter, should they decide to try and fight this particular issue in the courts?
Well, if you're going to allege that someone was engaging in time wasting, then you have to substantiate all the submissions that you would have made. However, if they were following the process that they ought to have followed, then I don't think it's going to matter. But the most important question would be, what prejudice have you suffered? Tell me the type of prejudice that you have suffered, so that I can put you back in the position you would have been had all the processes have gone in a much more quicker sense. If there's nothing that you can provide that on, then basically that argument is under the water. It's not going to matter anymore. But I think in this case, it's a process of saying internally, as the JSC, what is it that you should look at to make sure that the process moves a bit quicker, and you're able to save a bit of money here and there, and be able to adjudicate these matters as early as possible. Because, as stated, once a judge will remain a judge up until you pass on. However, that particular title must be earned. It mustn't be just a title in which you are given, and there are no obligations which are going to accrue to you.
Once again, we're watching history unfold before our eyes. Let's see then what happens with this particular matter. Let me thank you both for your time. Do appreciate your insights this afternoon. That is Mpumelelo Zikalala, legal analyst, and Alison Tilley, Judges Matter campaign coordinator.